Netflix is celebrating the week leading up to Halloween by bringing us 4 nights of a horror anthology from the master himself, Guillermo del Toro. Cabinet of Curiosities is going to bring 2 episodes each night, and I'm really excited to talk about them. This review is just going to cover the first night's episode, so let's get into it. First up is the tale called Lot 36, and it stars Tim Blake Nelson. Now, almost from the get-go, we are made to not like him. He's somewhat bigoted and an extremely gruff and rude person. And he makes his living by buying up storage units at auction and then trying to resell the stuff that's inside. He makes a bid for this unit that was maintained by an old dude for a really long time. And then Tim Blake Nelson gets the unit. Then inside, he finds some curious items amidst all the trash. This is such a patiently told story. Now, it's only 46 minutes long, but it feels longer. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. The story slowly builds, pulling us into the tale as we watch Nelson get more and more curious about his purchase. And through all of this, he's a dirtbag of a person. I mean, he's constantly abrasive to everybody he meets. The story hints at the supernatural, but it takes its time to bring us to the climax of the story. Now, this isn't really a scary story that's being told to us, but there is some disturbing imagery that begins to be seen, and that adds just a layer of creep to it. Now, I love the use of darkness within the setting. Nelson's character is constantly being thrust into darkness, and while we can still see some from ambient light, it also helps to create a very foreboding atmosphere, so when the crap starts to hit the fan, we're already feeling the dread. There's a mix of practical effects and CGI that are used, and they both help to add to the ominous tone of the story. Now, I think something that works against the fear that could be generated in this particular story is that Nelson is such an unlikable character that if he encounters danger, we don't feel tension at the potential threat that he faces. I mean, it's kind of like he would deserve it. So in one sense, we can be rooting for bad things to happen to him. But even with that, there is tension and anxiety to the story as it plays out. Now, we may not be afraid for Nelson, but that doesn't mean that the ambiance that's created can't affect us. Now, we watched with the lights out, and that's the way I recommend watching too. I mean, it just allows you to see the silhouettes and the shadows, which can be slightly freaky. For this one, there's no sex or nudity, but a ton of profanity and some violence. And next up is episode 2, which is entitled Graveyard Rats. Now, it's about a grave robber who must contend with some nasty rodents in order to get his bounty from a wealthy, newly dead person. Now, this has some subtle comedy to it, especially in the dialogue, and it takes place in something like the 1800s, and our main character is quite the talker. And he comes across like he's well educated due to all the big words he uses, but we also get the sense that it's probably just a facade since he's relegated to grave robbing to pay his debts. The setting and costume design for this is spectacular. I mean, there's a gritty and griminess to the whole production, making it feel like everything is covered lightly in coal smoke. David Hewlett plays the main character, Masson, and the character is like a 50-50 split of likable and despicable. He's got charisma, but because of his occupation, he's a bit hard to root for. There's an urgency that's created for the story where Masson needs to get money in a very short period of time, so he's desperate and he takes more risks than he probably would. And the crux of the story is that Masson believes that the rats are taking bodies from the graves, leaving empty coffins when he goes to rob them. So when a rich score becomes available, Masson is ready to pounce due to the large amount of wealth that the dude will be buried with. And this is where the fun begins. There are some wonderful practical effects and creatures that are created for this story. They're visceral and they're pretty disgusting, but they also work to make for some incredibly freaky visuals. Now, as Masson goes underground to get his score, there are tight spaces where the claustrophobia just enhances the danger, and then when it's combined with some awesome sound design, we are transported into a maze of peril with potential danger coming from any direction. This one has the opportunity to give you the heebie-jeebies with the way that some of the visuals for the story play out. And there are even a few jump scares in this that work well because of the dark and cramped places Masson finds himself in. Now, this is one of the shorter episodes at just 38 minutes, but the story still takes its time to build out a great narrative with enough development on the characters and the situation so that we feel invested and engaged. I mean, it's a tight story that moves us along efficiently in the narrative, but never feels like it's rushing us through the tale. And this really embraces the creature feature aspect of the story, and it provides some elements that I thought were unexpected, but I then also really appreciated them. I mean, it did take the story out of the realm of possibility, but I didn't care. I was invested in what was happening, and I loved the journey that Masson was taking me on. This one doesn't have any sex, but some nudity, some profanity, and then some gnarly violence. So night 1 of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, it starts off strongly, but there's a bunch more fun to have. There's going to be a bit of sci-fi, some Lovecraftian tales, a surprisingly emotional ghost story, some body horror, plus one that is just genuinely bizarre. Now, this is the right way to do an episodic release so that we get a week-long event. My plan is to do the reviews on each of the episodes, 2 per day, so stay tuned for more. I give Lot 36 4 out of 5 couches and Graveyard Rats 3.5 out of 5 couches. So have you been looking forward to this anthology series? Once it's over, I'd really love to hear which of them are your favorites. But in the meantime, let me know what you thought of these first 2 episodes in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.